It comes at last. Galadriel's eyes pierced the minds and flesh of Frodo and Sam in her garden. There was a chill upon the night's air. "You will give me the ring freely," she said, "and in place of a Dark Lord, you will have a queen!" The ring seemed to Sam to almost levitate from Frodo to Galadriel as the willpower of the lady overcame his master's will. "Us hobbits just aren't cut out for this sort of adventure, if you take my meaning, lady," Sam said. "And I know Middle-earth itself will be better under your care for the time being." Galadriel looked upon Sam, and for a moment the hobbit was scared that he would see a dark presence in her face, but instead she smiled at him. "I thank you both for your service." Her gaze turned to Frodo. "And not you least of all, Ringbearer. Your courage will not be forgotten, even as this age comes to pass. You and your friends shall rest here a while, before starting on your way home." Galadriel looked at Isildur's bane, and Sauron's salvation. With a glance to the west, she turned her back towards the wayward home of her peoples. "I will not sail into the west, not yet at least. I must first see Morgoth's servant defeated. I accept my queenship." She put the golden ring on her dominant right finger, and the night grew slightly darker, but the hobbits didn't notice. That night, on February 14th, 3019 of the Third Age, the hobbits told their companions of what transpired, and that they were all to set off to their homes in the coming days. Though some measure of concern passed over all of them, as this had been a foreign idea to them, Aragorn felt the most worried about what was to be with Galadriel claiming the ring. Early the next morning, Aragorn met with Galadriel to discuss the coming days of the Third Age. Aragorn found her slightly more grim, but thrice more beautiful and fair than he had seen her the night before, in appearance at least, though she felt a little darker. Galadriel told him that the days of hiding were over, and that he was to be known as the next High King of Gondor and Arnor. Aragorn was to ride with Boromir soon, and make the city of Minas Tirith ready for its king's coming. Though the queen's confidence was comforting, Aragorn still doubted the idea of her wielding the One Ring. She said that in the days to come, both elves and men would need to stand together against the growing darkness. She then bestowed her gift upon Aragorn and named him Elisar. As the Fellowship began to leave for their homes and bring Galadriel's tidings of hope across Middle-earth, Galadriel enacted her plans. She sent flet runners of Lothlorien to all dwellings of elves in Middle-earth, and she commanded them to muster their forces along the great river Anduin, south of Lothlorien. It is from there that they would begin their great conquest over Sauron. Legolas would lead the elves of Mirkwood, and Gimli would convince some of his folk to come to the aid of the beautiful lady as well. Using her friendship with Gwaihir, the Wind Lord, Galadriel called upon the eagles as well, and subjected the great eagle to carry her to find Mithrandir or Gandalf if he was to be found in Middle-earth after his fight with the Balrog. With her greatly increased sight and awareness from the One Ring, she found Gandalf within a day, but still roughly around the same time that he is found in the original timeline. After Gandalf is recloaked as Gandalf the White in Lothlorien, he becomes Galadriel's chief lieutenant, and in the next week, the White Council is called together to plan the rest of the Third Age. In Saruman's absence, Galadriel became the head of the council in her new power, and none opposed her. Though Gandalf and Elrond rejected the idea of any of them wielding the One Ring for good, Galadriel looked more fair than ever, though again there was an underlying feel of foulness, and in her beauty she seemed like Luthien with Naglamir, or like Elbereth in her stars. Her power seemed vast, and her decisions just. As for Gandalf and Elrond, we see in the books that they aren't completely sure that their decision to make the Fellowship of the Ring was really a good one. But seeing Galadriel use the ring for good makes their manipulation under Galadriel all the more reasonable. Anyways, they decided to reappropriate their power as well, and Galadriel was given Gandalf's elven ring, Narya, and Elrond's ring, Vilya, to enhance and magnify her own power with Nenya and the One. The council decided to exact justice upon their traitor before dealing with Sauron. In the original timeline, we get a meeting like this after the Battle of Pelennor Fields, where mostly men, alongside Aragorn, decide the fate of the world. But here it is elves and wizards. Now that's a point we'll get back to later. As the Queendom of Lothlorien expanded, and now included dominion over the other elven territories, the Malorn trees were planted and grown in all directions. Thus Galadriel led her host of the Eldar hailing from Lindon, Rivendell, Lothlorien, and Mirkwood, further down the great river Anduin and into Rohan. These elves moved swiftly under their new queen and reached Isengard near the end of February. Along the way in Rohan, they had slain many Uruk-hai, and they had only lost a few elves, as Galadriel's power with the 3 elven rings of air, fire, and water, with dominion over the One Ring, caused great rage in the Lady of Lorien, and those that defiled nature would stand no chance against her. The White Council acted as her own personal wardens, and a new peace came to Rohan. When the host reached Isengard, Galadriel rent the gates asunder, and bade Saruman speak with them. Galadriel's voice brought the storms of the north, and soon it was raining. Saruman's tactics in persuasion held no power over the firstborn of Iluvatar, especially those who were inspired by their liege lady. Before long, Galadriel did not only cast Saruman from the White Council, along with Gandalf casting him from the Order of the Wizards, but the elements too came to the supposed impenetrable Tower of Orthanc. The far distant trees made groans and noises as the Ents made their way to the Lady's calling, and after their coming, the Ring of Isengard and the Tower of Orthanc fell to the power of the Free Peoples, and Saruman was drowned by the waters of the mountains, though Galadriel believed that the waters had actually purified the former wizard. Soon the Ents were given control of the land that was once Isengard, and they were told to expand the borders of their forests, as it was in the Elder Days. The Ents did not protest this much, as their only problem in expanding both the Ents and the forest was the loss of the Entwives. But Galadriel, in all of her power and grace, planted new, Malorn-like Entwives, and some elves that had remained behind would awaken and teach them once again, like it was in the days of old. The elves mustered the men of Rohan as they had saved them from what would have been the Battle of Helm's Deep, and though the Rohirrim did not trust the elves, the King Theoden, who was awakened into new thought by the beauty of Galadriel, would follow where the Eldar led. And so it was that the men of Rohan and the elves of Middle-earth marched towards Gondor, and with one glance to the north, all in their host would see the new trees and many Malorns that had grown south from Lothlorien. On their campaign to the south, they would also encounter and destroy Sauron's armies that he had sent north to fight the forces of Dale and Erebor. After collecting Boromir at the head of an army from Minas Tirith, and Aragorn's forces who conquered the Corsairs with Oathbreakers and men of South Gondor, the host of the west marched towards the Black Gate. And because Aragorn never looked into the Palantir, Sauron never launched his assault upon Minas Tirith, which would have been the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and if he had, he would have sorely lost. At this time, Galadriel took to the Slag Hills and declared her intentions to both Sauron's forces and the Free Peoples. The Elder Days had come once again, and so too did the might of the Eldar. The last alliance of elves and men in the age past was not to be the last indeed, and thus a new friendship between men, elves, and dwarves began. Any who served in Morgoth's name would not be spared, and then the two factions did combat. Galadriel's forces of easily 30,000 against Sauron's forces of over 50,000 would fight, but with the aid of the Great Eagles and the seeming purity of Galadriel's rings, the battle was fought and the war was won. Over a few days, the host of the West and all of its leaders mightily overwhelmed Sauron's weaker and more frightened forces. The Tower of Barad-dûr was thrown down once again, and the Nazgûl who had served the One Ring and Sauron had been broken by the Lady's will. And that day the valiant prevailed over the cruel in this final war against Sauron. Mordor was cleansed by new airs, waters, and fires, and the King of Gondor returned to his throne. Though it was known that Sauron's Fëa was never truly gone from Middle-earth as the One Ring still existed, it was to be that Galadriel would remain in Middle-earth, and her power would be forever greater than that of Sauron, if he were to ever try to return. The elves who yet lived in Middle-earth remained in Middle-earth to cherish a new age under their High Queen of Lothlorien. Even Gandalf and Radagast were persuaded to stay in Middle-earth as protectors of the realm. Radagast would protect nature and wildlife, and Gandalf would protect the peoples. Malorns and all trees and different parts of nature expanded from Lothlorien in all directions, and any past realms of elves became one giant queendom with many fiefdoms. It seemed that Galadriel, in taking the ring, mastered her willpower over the One and did what all peoples believed to be impossible. She had used the weapon of the enemy against him. Her willpower had won. Or had it? The Fourth Age began, and a happiness fell on Middle-earth. A different sort of happiness. One that is different from the original timeline. The scouring of the Shire never happened, as Saruman's forces were utterly in ruin, and many who fell in the books still lived, but still, something seemed different. The four hobbits, Sam, Merry, Pippin, and Frodo, rode ponies west on the Great East Road after a journey to Gondor to see their friends Aragorn and Boromir during the year 1 of the Fourth Age, in Gondor reckoning, of course. It would be the year 3022 of the Third Age, but now it was the summer of year 1 of the Fourth Age. It would be almost 4 years since Gandalf's return to the Shire after his 18-year absence, when he told Frodo all about the One Ring. The hobbits felt a hope and a comfort in the land, but Sam's plain hobbit sense knew that something was restless in Middle-earth. "Oh, I'm not sure at all about this, Mr. Frodo," Sam said. "I mean, I know the lady, Queen Galadriel, healed your wound that the Black Rider gave you on Weathertop, but something about all this feels very funny. Somewhat unnatural, if you ask me and my gaffer." "You worry too much," said Pippin. "Queen Galadriel just saved the world as you had hoped," exclaimed Merry. "No, I'm not too sure either," Frodo said with worry in his voice. "Sam is right. Something feels different than when we left the Shire. I feel that we should hurry home." Frodo tried to spur on his pony that he had gotten in Rohan, but it wouldn't move faster than a trot. The other hobbits had found the same problem with their ponies. Eventually, after following the rows of newly planted trees alongside the Great East Road toward Bree, saw an unexpected sight. More trees. Right where the hill that housed Bree used to be, large oaks and cedars, and the occasional Malorn trees here and there, popped up upon the hill. "Well, where is it?" cried Pippin. "Where's Bree and the pony?" The hobbits investigated to find that many trees had grown through the town of Bree, been destroyed or uprooted by nature itself. The hobbits came across many refugees calling out in the dark woods for one another and cutting at the trees viciously. The hobbits asked around and found that many trees had been sprouting outside the city for years now, and suddenly, almost overnight, the trees overwhelmed the entire city and scattered its people. The hobbits worried even more for the Shire, and so they raced home, without their ponies who wouldn't leave the new grove of trees. Rather a dark forest, where no light entered, covered the far bank of the Brandywine. The hobbits delved deeper then, into the heart of darkness, to find what awaited them within. But all had found that trees uprooted their old homes, and their lives as they had known them became changed forever. They soon traveled and discovered all lands in Middle-earth were like this, suffocated by nature. Minas Tirith, a city of stone, Helm's Deep made into a mountain wall, Edoras of wood, misty mountains that covered Khazad-dûm, and the Lonely Mountain had all suffered the same fate as the Shire. All grandeur of a new day fell into bitter ruin. Galadriel had maintained and protected nature in the world, but went even further than that. Nature began to devour everything that defied it, and still overran those who loved it, like the elves who still followed their queen. Eventually, all races beside the elves became wanderers, sages and peasants in these new times, unable to sail into the west at all. In its own deceitful way, the One Ring had still achieved victory over the free peoples. Though it couldn't bring Sauron back, the West suffocated in their own ignorance of power and desire for good. The elves and the wise who decided Middle-earth's fate stayed under the rule of their new queen. The Elder Days had returned. The Fourth Age became the forever age of nature and the immortal elves. Hey guys, thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. As I thought about this story for the past few days, it occurred to me that Galadriel would really try to better Middle-earth through her vision with the One Ring. Her greatest sorrow in the books is witnessing the loss of the Elder Days while fighting what she calls the Long Defeat. So I think she would try to use the ring to bring back the Elder Days and the power of the elves. Gandalf says this quote to Treebeard in the books while discussing Saruman in the Two Towers. Quote, "But you have not plotted to cover all of the world with your trees and choke all other living things." End quote. But I think if a being that loves the earth were to be corrupted by the One Ring, this would basically happen. And I think that if Old Man Willow got the One Ring, the tale would end in a similar way, with nature taking over, but in a darker sense, with Sauron winning all of the battles. But instead, in the books, Galadriel had the wisdom to pass the test and diminish into the west, giving us the story we all know and cherish. Anyways, thank you all again. Leave a like if you found this video entertaining and share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. Join us on Facebook through the link in the description of the video to contact me more directly, and subscribe to stay up to date with my future videos. Let me know down below what you think about this theory. Would it go like this, or would it happen in a different way? And I must ask that everyone stays respectful to one another and to each other's thoughts, as this is a theory and no one actually knows what would have happened. Galadriel took the One Ring. So let me know your thoughts, and thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.